are the white people in this country, are they familiar with what the game is that the MI and the BPAs are asking for, or are they hoodwinked, or are they knowledgeable, or are we just playing a game on ourselves?
No, they are fully aware. If they were not aware, they would not give them as much mic time and as big a microphone as they give them. They're aware. But I think they're more aware than an MI and a BPA because they know that their philosophy leads nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
would you rather have somebody who's constantly preaching that they're the ones that should be in power? We should never have anything of our own. We should never try to establish any ownership. Or would you rather have somebody preaching land, infrastructure, nationhood, nation state, whatever? If you had to
Mm-hmm.
choose and you were white people, which one would you choose?
They would choose nationhood.
No, if you were white in this society and you had to have somebody on the microphone for black people,
Oh,
it
you
wouldn't.
would choose anything that was weak. You would
There
choose
you go.
integration.
There
All
you
right,
go.
all right. Now, given that, just by the mere fact that you had defined one of them as Black Power Americans, I
Hmm.
mean, they really, really see themselves as Americans. So therefore, uh, they they may see themselves as wanting to be up under white people with no power, just kind of a bigger space on the plantation, so to speak, but they would never admit it. All right. Now, having said that, I want to read a paragraph to you, and I want to get your reaction about an American, since they see themselves as such.
Hmm.
I'm going to read a little paragraph from from a book called "Letters from an American Farmer." It's a book written by a person by the name of J. Hector St. John de Crevecoeur. And this book was written in 1795. And this is a paragraph that I want to get your reaction to. It says, "What attachment can a poor European immigrant have for a country where he had nothing? The knowledge of the language, the love of a few kindred as poor as himself were the only cords that tied him. His country is now that which gives him land, bread, protection, and consequence. Ubi panis, ibi patria is the motto of all immigrants." That Latin phrase, ubi panis, ibi patria, means where there is bread, there is my home. What then is the American, this new man? He is either a European or the descendant of a European, hence that strange mixture of blood which you will find in no other country. I would point out to you a family whose grandfather was an Englishman, whose wife was a Dutch, whose son married a French woman, and whose present four sons have now four wives of different nations. He is an American who, leaving behind him all his ancient prejudices and manners, receives new ones from the new mode of life that he has embraced, the new government he obeys, and the new rank he holds. He becomes an American by being received in the broad lap of our great alma mater. Here, individuals of all nations are melted into a new race of men whose labors and posterity will one day cause great changes in the world. Americans are the Western pilgrims who are carrying along with them that great mass of arts, sciences, vigor, and industry which began long since in the East. They will finish the great circle. The Americans were once scattered all over Europe. Here, they are incorporated into one of the finest systems of population which has ever appeared and which will ever hereafter become distinct by the power of the different climates they inhabited. The American ought therefore to love this country much better than wherein either he or his forefathers were born. Here the rewards of his industry follow with equal steps the progress of his labor. His labor is founded on the base of nature and self-interest. Can it want a stronger allurement? What's your reaction to that? That was, as I said, a person by the name of J. Hector St. John de Crevecoeur. He was a French immigrant to the recent post colonies of Britain that became this country, and he is observing himself in the space of these new colonists, and he defines what an American is. What's your reaction to that, and what does that say about Black people who identify themselves, or you have identified as a Black Power American?
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from Malcolm X. And I want to read that quote for you because that kind of answers the question. He says, "No, I'm not an American. I'm one of the 22 million Black people who are victims of Americanism. One of the victims of democracy, nothing but disguised hypocrisy. So I'm not standing here speaking to you as an American or a patriot or a flag saluter or a flag waver. No, not I. I'm speaking as a victim of this American system. I don't see any American dream. I see an American nightmare." And the difference between what Malcolm is saying and what that guy is saying is that guy is speaking from his perspective as a European.
Mm-hmm.
And Malcolm is speaking from his perspective as a diaspora African.
Right. So in both what you're saying, what Malcolm was saying, and what Hector St. John Crevecoeur was saying, is that basically an American generally is a European person of European descent from various parts of Europe who are here, who designed this name and imagery for themselves, basically a settler. All right.
Can I give you, I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to give you like a quick example of what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Did you ever see this movie called Dragon with Bruce? It was the Bruce Lee story. It was like a guy who was playing Bruce Lee, and the name of the movie was Dragon. Did you see that?
No, I saw Enter the Dragon, but
okay, you saw the original.
Yeah.
In this movie, they showed a scene between Bruce Lee, Linda Lee, the girl that he, the woman that he eventually married, and her mother. And they were talking about, he went there, letting the mother know that his intentions were to marry her daughter. And they started having a discussion about children. And the mother said, "Well, what about kids? They won't be white, they won't be Chinese. What will they be?" And Bruce Lee said, "They'll be American." And Linda Lee's mother said, "Oh, no, I don't want to mess it up." He said, "They'll be American, like me." And she said, "You're not an American, you're an American citizen."
Yes, the distinction.
See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So when people think of America, just universally all over the world, it's a white man and a white woman with money. Mm-hmm. That's an American.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Well,
American citizens.
maybe we're citizens of the United States, but that's
Yeah,
different than being an American.
exactly. We live here, and that's how we're looked upon. We're looked upon as being just citizens. We live in America, but white people are Americans. Now,
Okay,
I know that may hurt some people. Maybe
r-
it is what it
right, right.
is.
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask you a question. Okay, so if well, first of all, let me say this. I think that in some ways in the evolution of things, the country is seemingly the United States. From my reading, when these white colonists first parted from Britain, with all people being here at the same time as slaves, they initially called these colonies. Their first idea was to call the whole thing the United Colonies. And what they saw is that these colonies, we can take Georgia, New York, Virginia as examples. They saw each colony as being a separate country. So they saw themselves as a Georgian, a Virginian, a New Yorker, New Hampshire, etc. But they thought that they were basically the same white people that were spread over different geographical areas. So for practical purposes, they thought that they should, use tax system and roads and things like that to connect them, but they will be essentially different countries.
Mhm.
So to create somewhat of unity for themselves, though they had distinct countries, Georgia, Virginia, New York, they call themselves Americans to create a sort of a ethno-cultural representation for themselves as settlers. And so I do think it's a distinction. I do think that the term American is basically a term that they had created to kind of encapsulate the idea of being a white settler. Okay, now having said that, if we accept that, and I think that's true, what you said, and what I'm saying now that it is true, American basically is a white settler, and they've defined the imagery and substance of that term for themselves. Then why is it that so many Black people believe that definition that I read from the book Letters from an American Farmer, why do so many Black people believe that definition to be untrue?
Believe what definition to be untrue?
To believe that the definition of an American as a white settler to be untrue.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Black
Propaganda.
people call themselves an American, or as you say, the Black Power Americans. They're saying this is their country. They are an American. I've heard the ADOS movement state that in their quest for reparations, that they see that the white people in this country are their people, they say, and that even African people or Black people who are coming here from the Caribbean or from African countries are in fact maybe racially them, but are not their people because they see their people as the white people, and they see an American people, and they feel rebuffed that they are part, as they say, of the American family, who have been made a bottom caste. And so given that, they don't accept this definition as being true. Now I think that the appeal of the ADOS movement as well as others, Black Power, Black American Power groups, or whatnot, they obviously don't believe that the definition of an American is a descendant of white settlers. So why do they believe this is untrue when all the evidence says that it is?
Because they're not going according to evidence. They're going according to propaganda, brainwashing over 500 years, and a percentage of our demographic that benefit from them being in the position that they're in. If you don't know, if you don't have a reference for something, you're going to go by what you know. And we don't have a lot of references, and I'm talking about on a big stage with big microphones, talking about ownership, talking about nationhood, talking about land, talking about infrastructure, talking about control, socioeconomic and political control. There's not a lot of big microphones. As a matter of fact, I defy anybody to tell me who on a mainstream microphone is talking about Black folks having their own nation. Name them. There's nobody. But let's flip that around. Who is talking about trying to make it here in America? You can't even count.
Right.
You can't even count. So is it shocking that they don't that they don't accept that they're not American? No, I mean it's a natural reaction to the brainwashing. It's sort of similar to like when you say a name of somebody, like let's say I say Gaddafi, and I ask the average person, Black person, what do you feel about Gaddafi? And they have a negative reaction. And then you ask them, well, why do you have this negative reaction? What did he do? And they'll give you blank stares because they don't know. They're just going off of programming. They're going according to propaganda. So when you're in for lack of a better term, the matrix, and somebody tries to say, hey, you're in the matrix, check this out, can't you see this? This shows you that this shit ain't real. You're going to get mad at the person pointing that out because it disturbs your fantasy, it disturbs your existence, it disturbs your comfort level. And that's the basic answer to that. So it's not shocking. If anything, you know what would be shocking? If we had huge sums of people that were for nationhood and wanted a land of their own, that would be shocking.
You mean given that would be contrary to the propaganda that we're being fed?
Exactly. Like the nigger manufacturing machine is a concept that I first put out when I first did my couple of YouTube videos. And the concept is that everything that's going on right now is the way that it's supposed to be going on, because it's the way that our system is designed. So if a nigger manufacturing machine manufactures Negroes, what's the problem? Isn't that what it's supposed to do?
Right.
So if you want to manufacture strong Black men and women who are for nationhood, then you got to develop a system to do that. You can't do it here. It's like trying to kick crack in the crack house. If you don't want to do crack, why are you in a crack house?
Right.
Doesn't make any sense.